Hi,
Hi.
welcome back. 2 months ago, on April 10th, a new gacha game called Black Beacon launched, and with its launch came a slurry of issues. The game was completely unplayable for a massive number of players, optimization was completely out of the window, characters were unbalanced, and a lot more. Obviously, when a game launches with this many issues, the developers have to do something about it, which is give a proper apology, a gift for the players so they don't lose faith in the developers, as well as actually fixing the issues. Well, Black Beacon did eventually fix a lot of these issues, but their apology and rewards were only given to the CM player base, leaving the global community in the dust at least for a while. Players were obviously outraged and a lot of chaos and drama ensued. There are more examples of this type of community favoritism, and somehow it always ends up being the Chinese player base favored over the global. So what's up with that? Today I want to look into this. First, I want to talk in depth about a few examples of this actually happening, just to prove that it's happening, and then I want to look into why developers may be doing this, and finally a call to action for everybody in global who does enjoy gacha games, but doesn't like this treatment. There is a fix to this and we'll get into that, but before we start, you should make sure to like and subscribe for more gacha and gaming content like this in the future. You should also join the Express Train Discord server for conversations and discussions about everything you can think of, especially gacha, gaming, and anime. We also do a bunch of rewarded events and giveaways, so make sure to join the Express Train Discord server through the link in the description. Now let's get on to it. So what happened with Black Beacon exactly? The devs for this game basically beta tested on the global community, releasing first in global to test the waters and then, after a week or so, released in China as well. Both releases failed, however, as both versions of the game had a lot of issues, like I mentioned, playability, optimization, and balance. This would be forgivable if the game was promising, the issues were fixed in a timely manner, and every player was compensated for these issues. However, none of these are the case here. Black Beacon is such a failure of a game that it didn't even show up in the top 50 of Sensor Tower's April reports, and as of writing the script, the May report hasn't come out yet, but I doubt it'll be on there either. The issues were also not fixed to a proper degree in a timely manner, and finally, only CM players were actually compensated at first with a 5-star selector and 30 pulls in total, which obviously was met with a lot of outrage from the global community, which is obviously fair. You should be expecting equal treatment for every player. Black Beacon Global Twitter did make a post on April 30th, but in this post, they announced no rewards and no proper apology for favoring the CN servers, and instead just apologized for the bad launch. On May 6th, which is my birthday, they finally properly apologized with proper rewards for the global community, but unfortunately it was too little and too late, which means this game is basically dead to the global community. Anybody in global who still plays it probably likes getting cucked. Or the incredibly hot characters. I mean, it is such a shame that this game turned out to be the messy excuse that it is, because the character design is genuinely just good, but moving on. On May 22nd, Nikke Goddess of Victory launched in China, and brought a whole lot of drama with it, again outraging the global community because of CN favoritism. The gist of it is that they included a lot of quality of life and gameplay features that global players have been asking for the longest time, but only in the Chinese launch, at least for a while. This may sound mostly fine at first, but the features CN got are genuinely game-changing, and I'm not really gonna go into them because I'm not a Nikke player, I'm just repeating what actual Nikke players have been saying. This obviously came as a shock because almost every single Nikke player would praise everything about the game, from the art style to the gameplay and story, but so many players and content creators completely dropped the game after the CN launch dropped. Now obviously a lot of players, especially gacha extremists who think that China is actually superior to everybody else, will definitely defend this behavior and have defended this behavior, but just because a few stray lost souls defended the million, possibly billion-dollar company for its mistakes, doesn't mean that it's fine. Although, I do have one more big example for you before we look into why dev teams do this, so let's look into it. Hoyoverse is probably the biggest gacha game company on the planet right now, with each of their 3 most recent games, Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, and Zenless Zone Zero, consistently landing in the top 10 gacha games in terms of revenue, which is due to the very high quality these games are crafted with, which would attract all sorts of players. Even if I would consider Star Rail and Genshin Impact to be somewhat of a failure since they never met the expectations a lot of players had for them, but I digress. Let's go a few years into the past, with Honkai Impact 3rd. I'm sure you've heard of this story, so I won't yap about it for too long. The TLDR version is that HI3 released bunny girl skins for a few characters along with inappropriate dance moves, but only for global players. And well, you would expect the CN community to go ballistic, and I would say rightfully so, but you also really can't release something like that in China without it getting censored, so I do understand why it never made it to the CN servers. Well, one player got so mad about this, he tried assassinating the CEO of Hoyoverse, and so they ended up removing the content and publicly apologizing for it. I'm only telling this story to prove that, well, the Chinese community is really into gacha games to the point where people would get so butthurt they attempt an assassination, and in a completely unrelated incident concerning Genshin Impact and a certain Wanderer character, also torture a cat because of being an insecure piece of shit. Now, these two horrible people don't represent the CM community whatsoever, and I'm really not trying to spread hate about any community or person, I'm just here to report facts, but you also can't deny how much CN really loves gacha games. They are by far the biggest market for gacha games when talking in simple country sizes. This allows them to really influence what changes game developers and especially Hoyoverse make. This has happened more than once in games like Genshin Impact, where massive changes happened to Zhongli and Yuvalette, specifically because of outrage in the CN community. Meanwhile, whenever the global community had any similar amount of outrage, nothing was ever done. Hoyoverse players these days commonly have the mindset of if China isn't complaining about it, it's not going to get changed, so don't bother. And it is pretty much true. As much as I've complained about issues in Star Rail, and as much as the global community complained about issues in Star Rail, none of these issues were really addressed too effectively because China doesn't really care about most of these issues. There were some isolated incidents, like players complaining about the MOC becoming a new character favoritism fest, but they never really stuck for too long, and CM players quickly forgot about those and kept on playing the game. It is true that Hoyoverse doesn't really value the opinion of global players anywhere near as much as they value CN players. Finally, there are some small incidents like the Kuro Games title punishing Grey Raven, introducing a skin for Alpha, one of the characters in the game, but only in the CN servers for what seems to be no apparent reason. If you looked, you would find even more incidents like these, and you might even find incidents of the opposite happening, but those are generally a lot less common and you would really have to look for them. So, why does this even happen? Why do we see so much favoritism in the gacha space? Well, a lot of people quickly chuck this up to the CM player base simply spending a lot more money, and most of the time, that's true. Turning back the clock to before when Sensor Tower started combining revenues, you could clearly see that most games, especially Hoyoverse titles, make nearly twice the revenue from the CM player base than they do global. However, that doesn't mean that global doesn't make money, because half of $66 million is still a ton of money, and eventually when you cuck a certain player base enough, unless they're really big fans of it, they're gonna get sick and tired and you'll end up losing a third of your revenue. Not to mention that this isn't always the case. I mean, in September 2024, Honkai Star Rail global servers reported $1 million more in revenue than Honkai Star Rail CN, and in the same month, Genshin Impact Global reported $7 million more in revenue than CN. Not to mention August of 2024, where each game's global servers also reported more revenue than CN. I bet you I can easily find more examples of this, and this means that you really can't count global servers out just because CN makes more most of the time. When you treat both communities correctly and without favoritism, you will end up with your eggs balanced in both baskets, and that can only be good for you. There's no reason to favor one server over the other, it's just stupid. Not to mention, a game like Nikke made all of its revenue from global servers until they launched in China, and while I don't have any doubt it'll be a massive success in China as well, and we will probably see its revenue more than double because of CN, it has lost a lot of its loyal global player base, which is not a good thing. This would have never happened if they simply released the changes for both servers at once, and in the case of Black Beacon, I mean, the game is a failure anyway, and in the case of PGR's Alpha skin, then it's really just stupid to not release it on both servers because you would just make more money by releasing it to a bigger audience. There was a lot of Western hate in the gacha community, and even then, a lot of Western players consider other Westerners to be inferior because they don't like certain gacha practices like being extremely predatory or having a lot of power creep in your game. And of course, the word tourist gets thrown around a lot in these cases. I've said it before, if a gacha player calls you a tourist, you're probably doing the right thing. Finally, what can you do about this issue? Vote with your wallet. It is that simple. If you don't like a change, don't purchase currencies for the game and don't gamble. And a lot of players don't realize this, but you playing the game directly makes the company money, so if you're boycotting, you really should consider taking a break from the game. I don't have much else to say about this. Be mindful of your spending habits, don't let anything get out of control, don't be a pushover when it comes to this stuff because you really don't owe these companies anything, especially when they don't treat you correctly. And finally, don't spread hate to anybody. This video is not to hate on the CM community in any way whatsoever. I am simply advocating for global players to be treated fairly, and in the case where it's the opposite, I also want CM players treated fairly. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Run Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with and discuss gaming, gacha, and anime, as well as to participate in many events and giveaways. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.